Hey there, this is Cooper from Telepathic Bunny Comics. Um, I might have sent the links a little bit late, so we'll see what happens, what transpires. Anyway, hold on.
Oh, hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
I didn't realize you're gonna be so busy today, man.
I'm
I just
I am
because I forgot I
I'm
was
jumping around. Oh, this is stream 3. I think.
stream.
Yeah.
He got in a nerd fight earlier. It was funny.
You got in a nerd fight. Uh-oh. What was
Oh
the
yeah,
topic?
Sim came in and Sim apparently really likes the
Snyderverse.
Oh,
and,
really?
So that was a fun discussion.
Oh,
So was he pro or
fun
not?
is a word for it.
He was pro
Pro.
Snyder.
You will never hear me do that.
Never heard you say what? Never be pro Snyder.
I think that he has some very good visual direction, and he has great style. He has a great team that helps him design a very true to form universe. He also has a depressingly bad grasp of what his characters are.
He kind of misses the
unfortunately,
point.
when you try to show him that you're wrong, he doubles down. I think the only one that was ever able to break through to him on that was Chris Terrio.
Right.
Which is why the Justice League Snyder cut is actually a fairly passable movie, is because Chris Terrio undid so much shit.
Well, at least it was better than the Whedon version.
I know that the Whedon version gets a lot of shit. It's not a good movie, but I do think that it has some very good scenes in it, and it's got some really good dialogue. Whedon's always been a big dialogue guy, but I do think it's funny because Sim was talking about Superman being almost more human than any one of us because of his desire to be human, and that's something that Whedon actually has in his cut. Is he's talking to Alfred, and Alfred's like, "Why can't you lead them?" I was like, "Because I'm not because Superman's more human than I was."
I think that's the wrong take for Superman. I think it's close, but it's wrong.
Yeah.
What I think Superman is he wants to be human and can't. And he actually envies us. Because he can't live a normal life. He has to live the life that's given to him. And he is everything we would want to be. So think about that.
I mean, that's fair. I think that has definitely some validity to it. But anyways, that's a whole other stream topic. We're here to talk about suspension of disbelief, which is something that is so critical. It's so absolutely critical. And the other day, Buddy and I talk shop all the fucking time. Pardon my French. We talk a lot. Yeah. And we were discussing a particular book that I felt like the way that certain things are handled, it was very jarring of my suspension of disbelief. So I had to put it down for a bit and kind of come to terms with the approaches that were being made. And I was just like, this is one of the big things that separates writers, like actual writers, from people trying to write. Because anyone can technically try to write, but a good writer is able to maintain the suspension of disbelief. So before we talk any further about that, let's get the official definition here. So a suspension of disbelief is the intentional avoidance of critical thinking or logic in examining something unreal or impossible in reality, such as a work of speculative fiction, in order to believe it for the sake of enjoyment. Okay. Right. So that's the official definition is. And so what that effectively means is that you as a person in the audience, you're able to sit down and enjoy a movie and you are able to set reality and what you understand aside for the sake of an enjoyment of the film or the book or whatever media you are consuming. That is your suspension of disbelief. And what a writer is able to do is able to maintain that suspension of disbelief without rocking the boat, because it is the smallest little detail can be something that completely shatters that experience, completely throws somebody from that suspension of disbelief and take them completely out of the experience. And that is one of the integral purposes of writing. When you are a writer, you are creating something that allows the audience to maintain a suspension of disbelief. We have Neff in the chat with his hashtag Odin hates Eric. I can't even with you. Anyways, so now that we have that open to discussion, let's talk about things that throw your collective shatter, like suspension of disbelief.
I think it's a budget. I mean, I think it's like a budget. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but it's sort of like it kind of counts down, like it's a negative budget. You know, like you begin at 100, and then you have all of these things, and these things include stuff like just basic storytelling. You know, if the story makes sense, character development. If the emotional beats make sense. You know, like so many times you just see somebody in a comic book, they just start crying or they get upset, and you're like, where did that come from? You're like, I don't understand, you know? And then you start questioning it. That's right there. We're saying, you know, you've broken that disbelief. You know what I mean? Now you've already screwed up, because now I'm going to critically think about everything, because I'm outside of the story now. You know what I mean? And and it's different though for every people or for different people. Like, you know, Odin is big into history, so something that takes history out of context is going to jar him. You know, he's gonna be like, whoa. But that's the thing, is as a writer, as the creator, you have to be aware and cognizant of all of that.
Right.
Is it fair? No, but that's what it is.
that's the job of a writer, is to be able to create an experience that takes into account lowest common denominator and factors in what would cause even any person of any background to have that, like, that to get jarred out of the experience, to no longer feel like the world that they are experiencing is within the capabilities of imagination. It's like, none of this shit makes sense. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? The more times you get your audience to ask the question why, you have failed, because you should be providing these things to them through visual, written, oral, if it's like a spoken, like, you know, like
it's
all
like a
of these
movie.
things. Yeah, like every single one of these things should be a part of the storytelling experience. And if you goof up at any of those points, and the audience start to ask, well, why did they do it that way? Why is this? The more times you have the audience asking that question, the more they're going to start thinking critically, and the more things are going to start to unravel, right? Because these are, like, at the end of the day, we're only human too. Like, we're not perfect. There are going to be threads that even we miss as professionals. And so the question is that how good of a job can we cover up those threads with believable and good storytelling, so that the audience doesn't find themselves in a position to ask the dreaded question of why.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, writing is a series of questions. That's literally what it is. It's a series of questions. And, you know, in order to have those, or your job is to have those, to have already asked those questions and have answered them within the narration that you create. You know, and so, I don't know, like we said, you know, it's not fair, because it entails a lot of things. I mean, especially if you know, that's why multiple genres are very difficult, right? Because if you you pull in a bunch of different genres, it's sort of like, what is it that, remember Spy Game with Brad Pitt? And he said, you know, if you go and tell that asset 5 lies, those have to be 5, you know, 5 truths every time you speak to that person. Well, every genre has its own truths. And so if you start pulling all that stuff in, all that's going to be true every time you talk about it. And then you're like spinning plates, trying to move on.
Yes. Sorry, I just received a notification from Twitter that a certain member in this in this audience has made a very interesting retweet promoting this. I hate you, Neff.
And so Nefarious is telling that he hates Eric.
He is saying, "Let's see if I can suspend the disbelief that I don't hold a grudge against Eric Weathers for creating a book to rival the Embrace."
The unfathomable loathing and hatred that Mike has for Eric can be undone by just 15,000 on SPQR. All of it gone. He will forever love Eric at that point.
At 15K, hashtag Odin hates Eric goes away.
Right.
Goodness. Eloise, the viewer. Hello, Eloise.
Hey, Eloise, how you doing?
Yep.
So what about you, T. Bunny? What do you got to say about the suspension of disbelief? Nothing?
So there's nothing that takes you out of it as a viewer. Like
my internet is going in and out, guys. So if I blink out, that's why.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So you must adjust.
I think it's out because he's he's not moving. Oh, there he is. He's back.
He's back. All right. So what things take you out of the experience? What things as an audience member, when you are as both a writer and as an audience member, when you're enjoying a story or what have you, what things jar your suspension of disbelief?
Right. Somebody doing something out of character.
Okay.
Like what? Give me an example.
Say somebody very masculine suddenly shows too much emotion, or somebody who's very feminine shows no emotion. So, or somebody gets kicked. Somebody breaks the laws of physics, like a 5'4", 110-pound soaking wet girl kicks a 300-pound man across the room.
Okay.
What? I see that every day. I don't know what you're talking about.
So obviously you have obeying laws of natural physics if it's in a realistic setting, right? And then like let's shift this to unnatural change in character, right? Because a very masculine man can be leveled in an emotional way if the foundation is laid properly, if they are put through the right set of circumstances and to the point where they are laid emotionally bare and then they break down, right? Because then it becomes the whole issue of the rock having the water of the narrative flushed down on it, and how long is the rock going to stand before it cracks, right? And same thing vice versa, where you can have a very emotional feminine character build this apathy through a plethora of negative experience, and this is how they now deal with it. So like,
let me specify extreme change in character that wasn't built upon, that just happens out of the blue with no build up, or so to clarify there.
Okay.
But yeah, that takes me out of something fast, pretty fast.
Absolutely, and that's why I wanted to make sure it's like, because a character can have those things that are that would normally be considered out of character for them, so long as the narrative is built to it. But the important thing is that it's inorganic. So if they just like for no reason just start breaking down into tears, and this guy has been like, freaking Sylvester Stallone in every 80s action movie he's been in, that's not really going to make sense. But if you put this person through a
there's always one tender moment that Sly writes in every, like in Rocky IV, when
but it's
his wife
always
comes back and he's like, "I'm with you to the end." To the
Yeah,
end.
but like it's
To the
built
end.
like
Yeah.
like it's never just like a random thing. But there are definitely times where you'll see like a story or what have you, where you'll have a character that's traditionally portrayed as X, and then they end up showcasing a Y trait completely out of nowhere, and vice versa. So I think that that's a very good point. Is obviously you need your characters to stay true to who you have created them to be in the eyes of the audience, and if you do have them shift from that personality that they have been built up to have, from that character that you have established them to be to the audience, there needs to be a good narrative reason. It has to make sense.
Well, I think one of the major, like, we were talking to someone just before this that was talking about in a lot of different movies where you progress from like an older generation to a newer generation, there has to be a sort of handling of that older generation because they're like friends to a lot of people. You
Yeah.
welcome them in your home. You may have pretended to be them at some point or had figures or whatever, right? This is like almost, a part of your life in some way. So to mishandle that character and not have the handing off of the torch to the next generation in a way that is believable, that you're like, yeah, I could see that. I'm okay with that. That completely, I mean, that is the problem with that. I mean, we don't want to call, people say, oh, that's not suspension of disbelief. Yes, it is. Because at that point, you've made me critically think about what's happening now. You've taken me out of the story
You've
because
gotten the
I don't
audience
believe.
to ask why.
Yeah, I don't believe that person would do that. So I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. Because I mean, what does everybody say about, say, like, I mean, I hate to say it because everybody goes into the movie so much, but like Last Jedi, Star Wars, all that stuff. The biggest thing is why. We don't believe Luke would be like that. Right?
Yeah. Because everything that was established prior doesn't fit into what we understand of the character when they do that later. Is it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't feel earned. And so I think that that's what it ultimately comes down to, especially when you're talking about that from a character standpoint. For me, I have things where, Buddy was talking earlier, I'm a huge history guy. So setting and how you establish your setting, how your characters communicate, everything like that is something that I'm going to pay attention to. If you have a period style piece and you're having them talk the way that you and I would speak to one another, that's going to start getting wheels spinning in my head.
What do you mean? So if I have somebody like, 1860s, Renaissance, and they're like, yo, boys, what's up?
First off, we need to pause. You just said 1860s Renaissance, buddy.
I know.
Come on, man. Like, I realize that you're not the history major here, but you know damn well that the Renaissance was in like the 15th century. Come on, man.
You do realize I'm egging you on, right?
Yes, I know. I hate you. The real hashtag button.
The bromance continues.
But anyways, like that's that's the whole deal. Is it's like if you have somebody that is in a specific setting, you have to make sure that the way that they speak and communicate with one another feels authentic to the period. Now, somebody that has done a very good job at kind of loopholing this, and love him or hate him, is George R.R. Martin with how he handled Game of Thrones, where you had this high medieval setting, and he makes sure that like the nobility and high class people speak the way that you would expect for like a high medieval setting to be. But then when you're looking at characters like the Hound or Bronn of the Blackwater or anything like that, these guys that are kind of, the the working class or sellswords that kind of skim the moral grays of the world, those people speak in like almost like London dock workers. They're foul mouthed. They don't have like they're shortening words, and they have a far more modern lexicon. And it works because you're using this as a way to showcase a distinguishment of social class. And so there are loopholes, but you have to create those within your universe, within your storytelling.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like you said. It's like in those kind of things, you have to. That's part of your world building.
Yes.
You know, if you create if you set it up so that the world building is like that, it makes sense that maybe, like if it looks older, but they speak in a dialect that's more progressive, you could, but you say, oh, but what happened is there was a Stone Age or something that happened, at the peak of technical Renaissance, and then they had to start over. Then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But if it is just, oh no, like, this is supposed to be representative of our just barely out of Neanderthal period, Bronze Age or something, and they're, talking like a bunch of people from, in the middle of Chelsea, in the 1900s, you got a problem.
Yeah, it's a bit problematic, like, and it's definitely one of those things where you do have to be careful. I don't think that anyone should be pigeonholed with trying to write like they're trying to write Shakespeare when they're writing like an old time period.
No, I mean, you write what you feel.
That's not even how those people talked. Shakespeare made up a bunch of fucking words. Pardon. But like, the important thing though is to make sure that you aren't using things that seem like they aren't authentic, I guess would be the right way to put it. You're not going to have somebody that lives during this period talk in a way that, you and I would chat with one another today, because there are different speech patterns. They're different, everything from back then. Like, and yes, you can use the whole, oh, well, in this medium where it's effectively universal translator. But at the end of the day, once somebody has already taken the effort to try and make their setting feel authentic through dialogue, through all of these things, you now kind of have to match that. Because if it's not matched, you risk shattering suspension of disbelief. Because, well, why didn't you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Again,
well, how much responsibility is on the person that's suspending disbelief, and how much is on the creator who's trying to get them to suspend disbelief?
I mean, it's all on the writer. It's all on.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an unfair ratio. It's 100% on the writer.
And yeah, like we said, that's unfair.
It's not going to work for everybody. Like, there are going to be people that'll enjoy something just fine, and there will be people that don't, because for whatever reason, whatever the writer did just didn't work for them, and it did shatter their suspension of disbelief. But at the end of the day, that's not the audience member's fault. They're the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the guy that tells the story's job to make the experience as authentic as it can be, so that when the audience gets in there, they are able to absorb what's put before them without having to ask the question why at all. Because the moment they start to go, well, why does he do that?
Yeah.
You have a fucking problem.
Well, I think that, but one thing is that, like, we talk about this as if it's almost like math. And it is, in a way. Like I said, there's a budget, right? But I think the budget has got, like, how to put it, like, there's a sweet spot.
Yes.
Where you can get away with suspension of disbelief, where you can break apart from what you think should be happening, as long as it feels right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, as long as it, like, you have an anachronism, or just something that sometimes, people just have something weird. They just want to do something extremely weird or different. And you can get away with that if the story's good. Like, absolutely. Let's face it, like, a lot of this stuff we talk about with comics and things, where they change the identity or whatever of the person, and then they're expect, oh, see, you're just gonna love it. Okay, well, I'll love it if the story's good. Honestly, I would. Like, if the story's great, I'll forgive it. I won't care.
Yeah.
But if it's not,
like, a great example of this is, it sucks watching war movies with people that have actually been in combat, because they are constantly like, that's not how that works. Yeah, that doesn't go that way. That doesn't do this. That doesn't do that.
I watched Sicario with a spec ops guy, and the whole movie he just sat with his arms crossed. That doesn't happen.
just shaking his head, going, "That's bull."
Why has he got his finger there? What's going on?
My brother was airborne ranger and was in and out of Afghanistan and Iraq like all the time when I was growing up. And I remember when Act of Valor came out, he threw the biggest fit, and it's still like one of those trigger films for him because he just goes on this like 30-40 minute tirade about how that is the biggest bullshit ever. And like he goes like this is the problem, because them making this movie is just them sniffing their own farts and buying into their own fucking hype, and they're not actually that good.
Oh, yeah, man. My dad felt that way. My dad was, he was Force Recon, Marine Special Forces, and he saw the movie Thin Red Line, which is very like a kind of a romantic telling of going to war and this person coming to grips with mortality and how they'd never see their girlfriend again. and my dad was like, any soldier who thought that in the middle of a battle would be dead. And he just went off on it. He was like, this is stupid. I can't. He's like, who teaches? I mean, I don't want to use the word, but he's like, who teaches this? Like a sexual gender slur, that a Marine would use.
So Bristolian Dave brings up another good thing. On the subject of war movies, I hate it when they include things that would clearly not have been in that time frame. This is, again, one of those things where, an average movie audience person will likely not recognize this because they aren't studied up on it. But somebody that actually cares about the specific period is going to notice if you have a World War II gun in a World War I movie, or if you have a gun that was or if you had a uniform that was no longer in circulation from one period because they're more known for it. Four Feathers, the remake that they did with Heath Ledger back in the early 2000s, got a lot of negative feedback from the historical community because they had the British in the Sudan in these bright red uniforms, when by that point in time, the British weren't wearing bright red when they were out in the fields and like in the Sudan and everything. They were wearing tan. And for a big budget picture to make that kind of a mistake is a big deal, because you're supposed to have people there to help with the research and making the film an authentic experience. Now, the average moviegoer isn't going to pick up on that. They're going to get, oh, well, the British wear red coats, whatever. But if you're making a period piece, if you're making a story that is set in an actual sequence of events that can be looked back to and researched, you need to have some consistency, because odds are that when somebody watches your movie, they're going to go, man, did that actually happen? And then they're going to go look it up. And then when they see that you didn't do your research, you have now lost a potential second rewatch.
The opening sequence to Saving Private Ryan caused World War II vets to literally have PTSD.
Yes.
That's a good example.
It was a very well done film. I mean, 1917 had some pretty similar effects. There were some very good examples of people putting in the extra effort into the research. And that's what it ultimately comes down to, is how well you convey your settings, consistency of character narrative, and the flow and progression of plot. So long as you maintain those three things, you should be able to maintain the majority of the audience's suspension of disbelief. And it's a very important thing as a writer to realize that no matter what you do, there is always going to be at least one person it doesn't work for.
Yeah.
There always is. And so you can't hold that against yourself, and you can't try and judge yourself based off of that. Because by the law of averages alone, there is going to be one person that experiences what you put out and just doesn't get it. It doesn't speak to them, and it doesn't click with them. And that's
it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And even if it is perfect for you, it's not going to be perfect for somebody else.
Correct. And like that's the whole thing, going back to what T Bunny was asking, was how much of this is on the writer and how much of this is on the audience? And the unfair answer is that the majority, if not all of it, falls on the writer. But there's also an argument to be made that it's neither's. A writer can do the very best that they can and can get everybody, the majority of everyone, to handle it well, to shatter their to maintain the suspension of disbelief. And one guy, it just doesn't work for. And in that instance, it's really nobody's fault because it was never going to work for that guy anyway.
Tolkien actually didn't believe in suspension of disbelief. He believed in you create an eternally consistent fictional world. You don't need to suspend disbelief because people will believe in the world that you have, and as long as it's consistent, then they won't have to suspend disbelief.
And
I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I get what he's saying, but
Tolkien is a phenomenal writer. And he was a brilliant world builder. But as great as the Lord of the Rings and everything are, there's a reason why until they became major motion pictures in recent times, they had barely broken through the zeitgeist. Like yes, they were big books. They were big in the fantasy community, but they are not what they are now. The reason they are what they are now is because somebody did their very best to take Lord of the Rings and put them in make them into a consumable product for the general masses, because as they weren't. And and that'll upset Tolkien heads from here till Sunday. But there is, I love Tolkien. I've read the Silmarillion. I've read all the Lord of the Rings books. I adore his world, but there is a reason why Peter Jackson didn't go letter to letter from what happened in Lord of the Rings, and instead did his own interpretation, because it wasn't consumable by the average audience. It went over people's heads, and as a result, people lost interest, which is a form of shattering the suspension of disbelief. Hold on 1 second, guys. I got a call coming in.
Okay, so Odin hates Tolkien too. Okay. Yeah.
Odin hashtag Odin hates Tolkien. What does this guy like? My goodness.
Let's piss on every nerd thing right now.
I know, right? I heard he hates Star Wars.
Oh, uh-oh.
I mean, at this point, I don't know. I'm not really sure what he likes. I think he only likes what he writes, Well, no, he did like.
That's bull. That is BS. I adore Tolkien. My God. I literally have like the Silmarillion. I've got my original 3 copies of each book of Lord of the Rings that I got when I was in middle school after watching the movies for the first time. I've got his 2 books that came out recently that were edited by his son Christopher Tolkien before Christopher Tolkien passed. I adore those films. And I adore those books. But the reason why my generation got into Lord of the Rings wasn't because of Tolkien. It was because Peter Jackson saw what Tolkien did and wanted people to appreciate them. Wanted people to appreciate that world. But Tom Bombadil would not have worked for the general consumer, because it would have immediately been, well, why doesn't he have
barrel-chested man in spandex that had the ultimate power of all? What are you talking about?
Exactly. Well, then why?
Yeah.
Why didn't
he just take the ring? And
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, is it creates the big question of why. Why didn't they do that? What, you hear the jokes all the time. Yes, there are genuine answers to, but why didn't they just take the eagles to Mordor?
Yep.
Yep.
This is a genuine complaint from people. Tolkien, as brilliant of a man as he was, is human. He's not right about everything.
Right. Right.
What? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
You know, I don't know.
I just wanted to offer a counterpoint to.
Oh, well, I thought that.
No, it's a
I
good
remember
counterpoint. It's a
reading
good point of
Tolkien.
discussion.
I remember reading like Tolkien and George R. R. Martin is kind of in the Tolkien vein, and then there's another writer, the guy who wrote The Wheel of Time, and not the first one. What's his name? The first author that wrote The Wheel of Time. Because Sanderson finished it, but I can't remember the first one. Anyway, we can't remember them, but they were very long-winded in kind of their descriptive ability and their writing. Even like Frank Herbert and Dune is kind of the same way. Frank Herbert's like 3 pages. Robert Jordan, there you go. Would just take forever to describe these certain things, and for some people, that's just the writing style of today is totally different than that. It's very quick, very if you're not on to the next point within the next paragraph, they're done. They're moving on, right? And so everybody wants something quick, and especially because of now. I mean, most people don't even want to read anyway. They want to watch TikTok videos or something and have it told to them. They got to feed that dopamine addiction. But I do think that, like you're saying, that the movies had to deal with a lot of that they had to be the pontificators. Like Jackson had to be a pontificator and bring that to a new generation that was able to take that in a form that they could accept. And that is, again, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, you might have a great story, but how you tell it is the most important thing, because, we always talk about this is like, you've got to make people feel, or you're going to lose them.
Well, Coleridge, the reason that he came up with the concept of suspension of disbelief was to reintroduce supernatural into fiction, because the realists and the ascetics had basically pushed all supernatural out of the fiction, and he wanted to reintroduce it. And so this was like a thought experiment to him, the suspension of disbelief, and it just caught on.
It obviously started with Aristotle back in the principle of theater.
Well, he reintroduced it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's what I was saying. It was like a just to make sure. Like he I think he's the guy that coined the term suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, but Aristotle.
But the original concept was Aristotle talking about the dynamic between the audience and the storytelling in the Greek theater and tragedy, the tragedies and what have you.
Right.
Aaron H. Jordan points out the Tolkien accurate movie would be 8 hours long. Absolutely. Like each one of those movies would be like 2 to 3 parts at least. And the action sequences would have been incredibly short. Like if you're going based off of like how Tolkien actually wrote it, like Helm's Deep would not have been this big epic thing that it was. It would have felt like, man, I felt like I missed something here.
Yeah, it would have also been like a lot of the team dynamic and that kind of thing. It was sort of there, but it definitely wasn't as prevalent, and especially between the races as it was, in those. And again, though, it's like that was a balance, right? He knows I'm going to lose some of the really heavy Tolkienites, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm really trying to do is reach a new. Like, I'm not trying to cut a bigger.
He was trying to bring this fantastic world to a new generation in a way where they would be enthusiastic about it and give it the time and the patience that it deserves, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And the Tolkien diehards can whine and complain about it all day, but they have been kept alive because of those movies, because those movies ignited a passion that would not have been there otherwise.
Well, and when you think about it, Gollum was really hard to sell, but he somehow made Gollum relatable and work. Yeah, that was the most impressive thing, I thought. Sorry, buddy. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you're fine. It's your show.
The dinosaur looks vexed.
Anyway, no. But yeah. No, I agree with you. I just, it is difficult when you're right. Like, we were talking about today, like even using a narrator, within a story. is something that can throw people off really quickly, unless there's a reason for the narrator to be there. You know, if it's just, hey, I'm talking, it's like Fonz, like Fonzie always seemed like a narrator to me, and he was just like, hey, and he just pointed at people, and he's like, and that was kind of it. But he sort of was just always there. He was always a character that would appear in the backdrop and go, hey, and then that was like just his entire contribution. And I think narrators are great, like we're saying, when there's a reason for them to actually be there, like what Odin was bringing up earlier to me was, like Bilbo Baggins. He wasn't just a narrator, he was actually part of it.
Yeah.
Right. So he was doing stuff. He's like, yeah, I'm writing it, but yeah, I was also there. I did things. There's a reason for me to, and so you're like, oh, okay, so I can feel with this character. I can feel like, what happened. There's something that actually, some sort of impetus and inciting events and things that happened to them and the story. And you kind of get, where those things collide, right? Because then it's like you have an obligation, which is sort of the story, and then you have your own like wants and desires and character development. And you're like, okay, where do those cross? Right?
Yeah. No, like, and that was something that we did talk about this morning. Is one of those things where a narrator can be something that shatters suspension of disbelief, because unless it doesn't, okay, we've taken over the chat. We have taken over the show. This is now pirate radio. But like, it's one of those things where if you have a narrator and it doesn't feel like it is it doesn't lend itself in any way to the story, it doesn't serve a genuine function, then you're just throwing in a trope because you need some way to get in some exposition.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what it ultimately comes down to. And it's something that, it might not bug every viewer, but there are going to be some that see that and go, man, that was real freaking cheap.
Yeah, that was lazy.
Yeah.
You're like, what was the purpose of that? Couldn't you have done that a different way? Again, if you're making the person think about, really what it comes down to is when you're asking why, you're asking about the actual meta of the story.
Exactly.
And if you make them ask about the meta of the story, you failed, because you're pulling them out of the story. You want the person completely enraptured within the story itself, within the world. You want them thinking things like if they think, I don't know if I would have done that as that character, then that's good.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, well, I don't disbelieve what they did, but I think I would have done something different.
I would have handled this different as a different thing than why, because exactly. I would have handled this differently showcases that they were thinking about the character's actions and how it would apply to them and how they would handle the situation, which creates a level of relatability without getting them to go overly critical and think, why are they doing that? There's a difference between having a character make a just absolutely stupid decision. I wish Neff was still in the chat, because he would be blowing it up going like, oh, really, Odin? What, really? Because like I've been working on a script with Neff, and there was one character that he just kept like, that was like his biggest things. Like, why is this guy such a dumbass? And it was one of those things where I had to tone it back. And you have to create a reason for a character's action that, you or I might not agree with a character doing something a certain way, but so long as it's in line with your character, you're never going to go, man, why is he such a dumbass? Like,
that's why internal logic is so important.
Yeah. Like, Jurassic Park has like probably the best example of this. Why wouldn't you pay the IT staff more? If your entire thing runs off of an electrical grid, why wouldn't you hire the people that run the grid? Why wouldn't you hire more people to run that and handle that properly? That seems like common
Why don't
sense
you have
bullshit.
better defense if your entire theme
Exactly.
park is
Like,
based on 20 or 30-foot dinosaurs?
it's like, why wouldn't you have like high-powered automatic weapons to keep the dinosaurs in check? I don't know.
Well,
You know,
the technology
why not
wasn't
have
there
roaming
at the time. Well, then you should not
And
have been
what
breeding
and
dinosaurs.
what human would ever think that females would be more docile?
Yeah. Like I just it was
Nowhere in the animal kingdom are females more docile.
no, it's like it's one of those things where that is a movie as fun as it is and as enjoyable as it is a movie that is constantly getting you to go, but why?
Why?
And the moment that you get that, you've shattered the suspension of disbelief.
But Michael Crichton was like the king at that.
He was.
I mean, look
he
at
was.
Eaters of the
I was
Dead.
about to say that.
How many times do we talk about 13th Warrior?
I love
Because
13th
we
Warrior.
love like the lines that they use, you know. That we always talk about,
Yeah,
like
but none of them
Hairgirl,
act
you know?
like complete dumbasses. There was never
No, not at all.
13th
I mean, but
Warrior
there,
where, like, everyone acts in character, and there's never a point in there where I go, man, why would they do that? Why would they go that way? Why would they do this? Because like everything does have like a flow, and everything makes sense. It makes sense. Like, you know, if you ask yourself, well, why would Bullseye go out even though he's like poisoned and is on his deathbed? Why would he even bother going to fight if he knows he's going to die? It's like, because he's a Viking. That's what they did.
Yeah.
Better to die with your sword in hand and being a badass and get to go to Valhalla than, you know, die sick in bed. There's no glory in that.
What I was getting at is that, like, he did prioritize the sensationalism of the narrative a lot of times over the logic. Like, you got like what is it? The Congo. We trained apes to use hollowed out rocks to kill. Why don't they just use your hands? You know, or eat,
That's
or
fair.
just their teeth, or whatever. You know, or in Sphere, you know, we have a golden atomic ball that's actually a strange sentient being from another universe, and whatever you think it becomes. What?
Well, Crichton, he wasn't a good writer. He was a good conceptual thinker, and he wrote blockbusters. But he wasn't a good writer. I mean, nobody would.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is I think he's a good case of, like, I never believed what he was writing, but it was always interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, oh definitely. I mean, conceptual thinking. I mean, Terminal Man.
You know, it was an Andromeda
idea.
Strain. That's an
Andromeda.
interesting concept, interesting thought. You're like, wow. I don't think I would have ever done this because it's stupid, but that's a neat idea. You know,
I mean,
and
timeline was rife with all the with moments like that.
Oh god, yeah.
I mean, timeline would drive Odin crazy. Odin would.
I am aware. I have seen Timeline. You don't need to.
He's like, no.
Timeline.
Did you see him? He had like a tick. He had like a tick, right? He's like, ah.
Yeah, we're
like, I could see his
eye.
We're not going. Oh, okay.
It's like a Michael Bay movie, you know.
Oh god,
any Michael Bay movie. It's like, dude, like
that's what was so surprising about Black Sails. Gotten into, like, the first season of Black Sails is okay. Like, it's a 7 out of 10. It gets really good in season 2, but I gave it till season 2 because I was so absolutely slack-jawed that Michael Bay did something with some substance that I was like, man,
when's this going to turn?
And then it just turned. It just kept getting better. Like, it was a good show.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, like, you were talking about a show the other day that was fantastic because this is we've been talking about translations. This is a translation of a comic book to a television show, right? And the television show did it better, according to a lot of people, right? And we're talking about Miss Marvel, as we'll go ahead. We're talking about Miss Marvel, and I think Odin has a little bit of a personal stake in what happened. His history lends itself to understanding it a little bit more than some people may, but it's still, like, it handled some issues better and had a better internal logic than the comic did.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, and this was what I had talked to Buddy about, is, you know, I know that Kamala is a a figure of controversy in this side of the community, to put it best. But I think that even her detractors would have issues going against Comics by Perch did a fantastic sales analysis of her initial run and her runs up till present. And her initial run was a success with a 30% increase over time. She didn't really start to fall as a character until Civil War II, which, let's face it, screwed over a lot of characters. So that's no fault of her own. That's something else. But what I had always said about Kamala is the things that were set up in the initial arc that I thought could make her a character on par with someone like Peter Parker, could make her on par with these bigger characters, was if you created the internal struggle of not all values are universal. Okay, she comes from a traditional Pakistani family that is actively participating in Islam, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's going to have a culture clash with Western values and American culture, especially in New Jersey, where she's located. And so there was going to have to come a point where Kamala was going to have to choose, at least from what I saw, between being a superhero, which is a traditionally Western American thing that upholds those Western ideals and values, versus being a member of her community and being a part of that community. And they never got there, and they would always kind of pussyfoot around the issue and not do anything about it. But at the end of the first episode of the TV show, they address it head on. Her mom straight up asks her, "Are you going to be the good person that we raised you to be? Or are you going to be one of these in your head and the clown's fantastical cosmic people?" And the mother leaves the room, and Kamala lays down on her bed, and it initially looks like she's really upset, but then she smiles to herself and she whispers cosmic. And my jaw hit the floor, because this is something that I felt Marvel never had the balls to do, because it would put a potential negative light on this culture clash. Because, growing up, I grew up in Northern Virginia area, where you have a very mixed demographic of people. I have known and dated girls from traditional Muslim families. The amount of these girls that I know that had massive opportunities that they had to turn down because they were effectively told, you either take this, you can take this, but if you do, you're going to be ostracized effectively, is insane. And there was a girl I dated back when I was at the local community college, that when she graduated high school, she had a full ride to UVA, and her parents told her she couldn't go because it would put her in the dorms, and they wouldn't have any control over her there. And so she could either go to UVA and do that, or she could be a part of her family. And this is a very real struggle, and the way that they handle it in Miss Marvel, I think, is very good in showcasing the positives of both sides, to where this is an actual decision. And this could be a very unpopular take. I'm sure that there will be some guy that clips this and goes, "Look at this idiot." And you know what? That's all well and good. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions about a show. But I saw this, and I was so impressed that they actually went there. Not only that they went there on episode 1. When this is something that they've kind of danced around in her original run, but never actually tackled.
If you go, he's not on Twitter anymore, but there's a guy named Cameron Pasha who was he is a writer of movies and a script doctor, and
I'll
he's
be
a
right
really
back.
cool guy. And he is Pakistani. And he said he watched the movie first to kind of vet it out, right?
Yeah.
Because he hates woke movies. And then he said he loved it so much, he invited his entire family over to watch it with him. And he watched it with his mother for, the full hour. And he said at the end, his mother cried.
Kamala Khan?
Yeah, well, cried at Kamala Khan, which she did, yeah. But his,
okay.
Cameron's mother cried, is what I'm saying. And I was like, wow, that must be really good, because I've seen Cameron rip apart movies. I've seen him, go in, just tear into the suspension of disbelief. And like we're saying, this is one of those times where it's like, it's a suspension of disbelief in a different way. Like, not everybody is going to get that, right? They're not going to understand how a Pakistani family, a Muslim family would be. But they do. And it's getting these like rave glowing reviews. And I'm the kind of, I'm like, you know what? I don't get that. But what I do get is the glowing remarks that these other people are giving it.
Well, I think the best example of keeping people in that pocket and keeping disbelief at bay would be Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
I mean, was there ever a moment that you thought that guy could have never done these things? No. You followed him all the way through, from mild-mannered, chemistry teacher at a high school, all the way to drug kingpin, all the way to
well, I mean, they set it up.
He was
They set it up that he was miserable.
Yeah.
He had no purpose. He was miserable. I mean, I would have diagnosed him as clinically depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But
he was also unfulfilled.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his wife wasn't even paying attention to him.
Mm-mm.
She was just like, yeah, I'll give you a handy on your birthday, and then forgot. And
right.
And he had nothing. He's like, well, I got nothing to lose. I mean, he was this guy, and he was, and the other thing too is then they set it up that like he was a genius, like a super genius that had created these amazing things that made other people, hundreds of millions of dollars or something, that they formed entire corporations on. And I think you had to have that, because without that, like if he's just mild-mannered dude, and he's just mild-mannered dude, not intelligent, not anything, but he knows a formula, right? You wouldn't have believed it. You'd been like, nah, I don't see that. There's that fall's not precipitous enough. But because the slope of that was just was so downhill, I think everybody did understand that, and they went with it, and they're like, yeah, because really what it comes down to is, would you do it? If you think in any realm you would do it in any way, you could say like, I might do it differently, but would you do it? Would you risk everything? And I think that it's kind of sexy to think about that. It's almost like you're gambling. You're gambling with somebody else's money. And who doesn't love to do that? And I'm alone. It's just the dinosaur now speaking. Well, this is fun. Let's read what some of the comments here say. The thing with these characters is a lot of them are actually good characters. It's the shitty writers that can't give them compelling stories, says Bristolian Dave. I agree with you, Dave. I think that unfortunately happens quite a bit. A lot of times, like, I don't know. I was talking. What? Who's this? Oh, I think he's back.
Sorry, guys. My internet keeps going in and out.
Yeah, no worries. We were talking about bad writers taking these characters and not, and I think that's like, that is the thing. Like, a better writer can sustain the suspension of disbelief for a longer time on a lot of these subjects. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like Ta-Nehisi Coates, I didn't believe his Captain America. I just didn't believe it. It was so far against the character that had been established and that we knew, even with like, the Hydra stuff and everything else, that when we saw, Flag down and all this other stuff, we're like, well, I'm done. I'm out.
Are you talking about the Coates cap? We don't talk about that, man. Like, I I still have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea why, given that man's reputation and the things that he's written in the past, why any single person thought giving that man control over Steve Rogers was a good idea.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Luckily, he's off the book now. Like the new Steve Rogers book that they're doing, I am likely going to check out the first few issues just to see, because it would be nice to have a Captain America book that doesn't suck. It's been over a decade.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely sabotage. That was definitely
the last good
assassination.
arc. The last good arc that Steve had was under Remender.
Oh yeah,
You didn't like anything Brubaker did?
Absolutely crazy.
Remender was after Brubaker.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
The last good, like he was the one that was doing Captain America at the beginning of Marvel Now, through like Castaway and Dimension Z, and like he had the Nuke arc that's really good. Like he did everything leading up to Sam Wilson being Captain America, and then did the initial Sam Wilson Cap run, which I actually thought was pretty solid. And then Remender took over. Not Remender, Spencer took over both runs after. Because he's the guy that did the Pleasant Hill story.
Well, Rick, I don't know, like in the books that I read about from Remender, he fixed his suspension of disbelief with large diaries. Like every book had like, okay, this makes sense because I'm gonna write 3 pages before you see the first page.
The thing that I actually really liked that Remender did was he would give flashbacks to Steve and his mom. And I actually really liked the stuff that he would do with Steve and his mom, and showcasing that his mom was the person that kind of forged who we know him to be. I thought that was great. Like there's this one bit at the beginning of one of the issues where like his dad has come home from like work and is not sober, and he and his mom get into a fight and she gets hit and she stands up to him and he just goes, "Go sober." Like it isn't even like you're a piece of garbage, you need to sober up. Go, like don't come back till you're better. He just stands up to him. And like it was, I really liked how Remender handled the character. And it was so disappointing because like the initial run of his Cap was drawn by John Romita Jr., who I don't like as an artist. I think that he is one of the prime examples of, in the
nepotism.
Comic, like he's the comic book equivalent of my daddy has a yacht, and he got
Hunter Biden.
Position. Yeah, like
oh goodness.
He is that guy. He is not the artist his father was. He is nowhere near that good. His best work was on, Amazing Spider-Man back in the day. And even that had its ups and downs. And the only reason why people remember that arc as well as they do isn't because of his artwork. It's because it was written by Straczynski, who was a freaking awesome storyteller.
Straczynski wrote Marvels, right?
Yeah, well, most importantly, he wrote like all of the good Peter Parker as an adult having a functioning relationship with Aunt May, with Mary Jane, and having like a trust circle between him, Aunt May, and MJ about him being Spider-Man and them actually being like a functioning family unit.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, so Cap has had it way worse than Spider-Man. I'm sorry. Cap has had it so much worse than Spider-Man. Cap hasn't had a good story in a decade. You can dislike Superior Spider-Man. It's a well-written book. The whole point, the whole point of it is that it's Otto Octavius. It's not Peter Parker. Yeah, and that's what stings about it. And even if you were going off that, at least Peter's had spin-off books that have been absolutely tremendous. You've had Superior Foes of Spider-Man, which was freaking hilarious. It was so good. You had Spider-Man Life Story by Chip Zdarsky, which was incredible. Spider-Man has had it much better than Cap. Yeah, he had the really crappy Bendis run that no one liked, where he was the head of Parker Industries, and it was really bad. But I will take that any day over what Cap's been through in the past decade. I think John Romita Jr. keeps trying to revolutionize the art of the Golden Age without knowing what made it good. Yes, correct. I think that this person has hit the nail on the head. Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan.
Everyone looks like a block of cheese. So they look like blockheads.
Go look at any of Romita Jr.'s work in the past 5-10 years. All of his male characters look exactly the same, and they look like a block of cheese. It's 100% on the mark.
Well, he says, who's it? Bristolian says they hate Cap because he stands for everything they hate. I mean, I think he just stands for everything they don't believe.
Aaron, AVX was okay. And the only fight that makes absolutely no sense is Iron Man versus Magneto. And they know it doesn't make sense because they literally only are able to have Iron Man win that fight because Magneto loses interest.
What?
Yeah, literally, Magneto summons the magnetic force from the orbit of Jupiter and starts wailing on Iron Man with the force of the sun, and literally at one point just goes, I don't care about this anymore, and Iron Man gets in one last haymaker and ends the fight. He's like, my mind's elsewhere, paying attention to what's going on down on Earth, and this fight doesn't matter.
I mean, depending on which Iron Man it was, he could just, I don't know, if it was the older one, he could just crush his heart.
Yeah. Iron Man had made this specific magnetism suit where he got some pretty solid hits in on Magneto initially. And then Magneto just goes, you really thought you could outdo me on this? You're an idiot. And so he goes up into orbit and takes a Stark satellite and improves his armor with it and boosts his magnetic abilities to pull the magnetic force of the orbit of Jupiter and just starts wailing on Iron Man. And Iron Man even goes, oh, crap. This does not feel good. And he would have won that fight if Magneto, 3/4 of the way through the fight, just goes, not really feeling it anymore.
We're just going into nerd fights now. We just say, how would Magneto beat Iron Man? Let us count the ways.
It doesn't make sense because they literally, in their own story, they literally have to have Magneto just go, yep, I don't care anymore. I don't care about this fight anymore. And that's how Iron Man wins the Iron Man versus Magneto fight.
I mean, if he wanted to be just totally mean, he could literally just, seal the suit shut, break his boosters, and throw him into space.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
Well, before my internet completely goes out, I think we should probably end the show. Okay. It's been an hour anyway. Oh my God, yes, and don't get me started on Thor. They're always doing him dirty because people think he's
Jason Aaron had an incredible run on Thor, and it makes me so upset that it looks like the MCU is about to butcher what he did with Gore the God Butcher and everything.
I know everybody hates that whole Jane Thor thing. But I saw the end of that where explodes and she's in fire and dying. That's one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen.
Jane's run on the Jane Foster Thor run is one of the few one of the few stories from that timeline of All New, All Different that didn't suck. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And it had a lot of interesting concepts, like the fact that Jane had cancer, and every single time she would transform into Thor, it would cure the chemotherapy. It would cure the chemotherapy,
which made her worse.
And then she would come back, and because it had cured the chemotherapy, the cancer that was a part of her had been reinvigorated by her transformation into Thor, and so she would be worse off. And I thought that was a freaking awesome dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was like, wow, what a twist of things. There are some really stupid things that happened in that era, but Jason Aaron was like one of the few people that was consistently doing good work, even with being shoehorned with this concept that I don't think even he fully bought. But he gave it his all, and he made something pretty decent out of it, I think.
Yeah, I thought, like I said, I mean, I remember reading the last couple of issues of it, just because, I don't know, I got them, and I was like, huh, I don't hate this.
Yeah, that's pretty much my whole take on that run of Thor was.
Yeah,
I just read it and I was like, I mean, is this the best thing I've ever read? No. Is it terrible like everyone's pitching it to be? Absolutely not.
No.
Mm.
And it does have some just flat out outstanding moments.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Mm. Okay. In other words, it didn't suspend your disbelief. Land on the feet. But no. Okay. And I'm froze. Okay.
I see you.
You're still here. You're still here, Coop. But that being said, I do think
now he's gone. Okay. All right. So we're going to end the discussion in the channel
with this perfect screenshot. Make sure that you damn it, he came back.
So Odin, what are you shilling, baby? SPQR?
Oh.
SPQR.
Today is the final day of SPQR's Bizarre Adventure.
Link is below.
If you have not backed yet and you want to, be sure to do that. You can get SPQR's Bizarre Adventure. You can get Elysian Fields Remastered. Both are Zero Issue and Pyramid Gambit. And you can get the Embrace. And there's lots of other extras you can get.
You can get the Embrace plushie.
And you can get the Embrace
plushie. Be cuddled by all those arms.
Yes. He's 18 inches. He's a big plushie. He's a big boy. And he's adorable. So
do you have one? Can you show it?
He's not here with me now. My son took him with him. And
aww.
He's the first one is my kids. So anyways, point is we're closing up the campaign tonight, so it'll likely still be around on Indiegogo over the next day or so.
The Queen Bee of CG herself.
I hadn't announced any of that yet. Hush.
Okay, fine.
Anyways, we will be doing a big closeout stream here later tonight. I will be announcing the more specific details on that announcement will be made later. But make sure that you grab your book. We have a fantastic deal to catch you up on all of our previous works, and we just have a lot of great value. And
there's some original art from his artist before he got his tremendous level up.
Yes, there is. Sorry, I am beat. This is stream 3. After I finish here, I'm going to be picking up the kid, taking a little bit of a break, and potentially going on a CG UK stream at 6 or 7. It's going to be fun. I'm going nonstop today. I am very tired.
You seem very excited.
I'm wearing thin, man. I'm getting. Whew.
Okay. Well, so that's what we got from Mike from Odin. Get the SPQR. It's great. JoJo influenced Roman history. Wonderful stuff. If you go and take a look at it, it's illustrated by lovely Filipino woman Kari, right? Kari?
Yeah, Kari Salviejo. Phenomenal artist.
Yeah, I mean, I would grab this now. I mean, this chick's gonna take off. And probably her and her husband. If you love getting in on the ground floor, remember Alfici, he blew up quick. Somebody found him, and it was just boom. All of a sudden, you couldn't afford him anymore. So get in there, get square, buy the plushie, buy the box, buy it all, then buy it again. All right, so I am the author of Sins of the Fae, and it's basically a young mother trying to keep her life and her happily ever after alive after these gods begin to rise from the ocean and tear everything apart. So her fantasy becomes a nightmare, and she has to make it out. So if you want to buy that or you want to check it out, it's sinsofthefae.com. And on Indiegogo, it looks like T-Bunny's got the link down
is below.
So just check that out. Go there, have a good time. Buy one, buy two, buy three, however many you want. Your three's good. Then we got T-Bunny. What do you have, baby? Where can we find you?
You can find me here on this channel, and you can find me on Twitter as telepathicbunny.com. I'm also on Instagram as telepathicbunny. Just check me out.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody just showed up, but we're leaving. You have a fantastic day. Keep on writing, be cool, and have a great weekend.
All right. Bye, guys.
Tell me what's on your mind.